Welcome to the Fuzzy Mike, the interview series, the podcast, whatever Kevin wants to call it. It's Fuzzy Mike.
Hello, and welcome to the Fuzzy Mike. I owe you a sincere thank you for all of the new followers, subscribers, and listeners that have been joining our family. I'm so grateful to have an audience for this show. Now, my guest for this episode, David Shamszad, has a somewhat similar story to mine.
He wakes up in a strange room. White walls, white bed sheets, white everything, except a blue chair, one small window. It's gray outside. A plastic bracelets on his wrist with blue letters. Butler Psychiatric Hospital. The last thing he remembers is the knife, watching it press down. His skin, it's tougher than he'd expected, stretching and contorting, pressing harder, then nothing but black. As a teenager, he studied hard, he mentored at-risk kids, he busted his ass at basketball and crew practice. But in his early 20s, bipolar disorder ripped through his mind like wildfire. Maddening pendulum swings between despair and euphoria that he kept secret and untreated. He'd sworn off alcohol after seeing addiction torment his father. But in distress, he turned to that familiar lifeline that he knew would ease the pain. Years roared by as alcohol and bipolar disorder led him through a certain hell. Nothing could free him from addiction, not getting up by cops and cellmates, not spending weeks in a psychiatric hospital after a knife was pried away from his wrist, and not losing his partner after she'd done everything she could to help him. He was on the verge of drowning and ready to surrender. Tearing through the streets, screaming wild, eyes shut, windows down, engine gunning, 90 miles an hour, 100, 110. Will it be over tonight? I'm ready to be swallowed whole, he thought. But he wakes up, bloody and alone, alive though. His partner's love is that tough, leathery kind, the kind that holds on to someone dangling from a cliff, even if both might plunge. She feels his pain in full measure, every tear and each drop of blood. With her faith, help from those that stood by his side, and his own grit, he sets out to beat back the massive waves of addiction and depression. Someone new emerges from the wreckage of a former life. A decade later, he's a father, a partner, and an entrepreneur. And with true, raw vulnerability, he's got a hell of a story to tell about mental health and recovery.
Hold on, man. Damn, brother, that is powerful. That's amazing. David Shamszad is my guest. Thank you for sharing that. That is the start of your upcoming book, isn't it?
That's right. That is right.
This is your story.
This is my story, and this is a story. It's gotten me here to this point. I'm 42 now, but my story starts off when I'm in high school, and when I first started seeing signs of mental illness. I didn't know what it was at the time, but I found out later it was bipolar disorder setting in.
So what were those first signs in high school for you? Because that's when I figured out I had something off too.
So by the time I was like, 18, so towards the very end of high school, getting ready for college. I was a upbeat, I was bound for great things, man. And, I had gotten kind of a straight A resume in college or in high school, and I did all the things, and I did the yearbook and the photography and all the stuff to get myself into an Ivy League school. And, when I look back at pictures from that time, as recently I was putting together some pictures from, this is like a couple of weeks ago, and I just noticed pictures from high school, and I'm just fucking smiling in all of them. And I'm sure I wasn't ear to ear grinning every day, but when I look back at that time, like that is kind of how I remember it.
But is that real, or are you masking something with that smile?
No. I was 16, 17, and I really felt great. And then when I was about 18 and then heading into college, that's when things started to change a lot. And all of a sudden that I would have days where I felt great. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, those days just got swallowed up by sadness that was crippling, that like literally felt like gravity keeping me in bed and keeping me from moving. It almost like it felt like a physical sensation. Like that's how dejected and sad I could get. And I had no idea what was going on. I hadn't really felt it before, but like talking to people was really hard. And I would need to spend a few days like just in my own head, brushing my teeth, like showering, these like basic things that you don't really think about, like can become, they feel like monumental tasks,
Mhm.
and I know you know what I'm talking about. Um, but and then it would be gone, and all of a sudden I was back to like, yeah, I was exuberant, and like I think that's how people thought of me, was just always kind of like flying high and almost hyperactive and excitable and enthusiastic, and people kind of fed off that. Um, but and then just like that pendulum swing I mentioned it in the beginning of the book, like that would be gone, and I'd be back to feeling um, hopeless, like I didn't even deserve to be there. I didn't deserve like the tiniest little space in the world. I shouldn't even be there.
And it's not anything that happens exteriorly that sets you off. It is completely internal, this switch.
Yeah, you just wake up like that one day.
Exactly. And people can't understand that when, and like you said, people thought you were outgoing and gregarious, but inside you're fighting this battle every single second of every single day.
Yeah. And, so like this is 20, 25 years ago when this
Mhm.
is all starting. And like we've come a long way as far as like having conversations about mental health, particularly in the male community. Like it's so much better than it was back then. And you have athletes, you have celebrities, you have influential people who have been open about um, depression, bipolar, um, places that people didn't really go before. But this is 20 years ago, and like I didn't have the vocabulary, I didn't have the lexicon to understand or think about these things. So I sure as hell wasn't like talking about how I was feeling, let alone understanding it. Um, and things just got, but I was functioning, like what I learned to do is if I was feeling great, like great. I had a weird amount of energy, and people fed off it, and it served me well sometimes. I was on a team, I was on the crew team, and I think I sort of like on my most euphoric, hyperactive days, yeah, it like probably yeah, it was probably useful in a way to the people around me. And what I learned to do on the other days when I was feeling like I literally couldn't have a conversation with somebody, I was so frozen. Um, that lifeline. I learned to drink when I was really young. I learned it growing up.
How did
I
you
had
learn that?
trouble.
I read in your synopsis that you started drinking at 13.
Yeah, so
How did you
yeah.
learn that?
Um, well, I mentioned my family, and my there's a history of it in my family, and
Okay.
it's serious, and um, yeah, a really serious history of alcoholism in my family, and that's
I think
been
that's a gene. I think that's a gene that can get passed down. I also think depression's
there's
a
no
gene
doubt
that can
about
get
it.
passed down.
Yeah, there's
My
there's
dad,
no doubt about it.
my dad was the fifth person on his side of the family to kill himself.
Wow,
Five, five. Yeah.
yeah, that's tragic. I'm so sorry to hear that.
Oh, bro, it. You know what, man? The only thing that bothers me about it, David, is I don't know his mindset when he was walking down the stairs to go hang himself. I don't know if he was sad, mad, or just that hopeless. Because I didn't really. I mean, I look at pictures of him now, David, and I don't recognize that guy. I don't know who he was. He was pretty secretive.
Yeah, and there's you know I think there's just such a huge correlation. Like if there's no vulnerability and there's no room to talk about this, then there's no room to get help and to get treatment because you don't start taking the steps. And, and that's kind of, I'll get into this later, but that's kind of like that's what's got me on this mission now is like hearing stories like that, what you shared and, and my own story, and everybody's story who has, really a tragic ending, or almost a tragic ending. And I started just thinking about like, the only way to get better is to get help because there is help out there.
A lot of help.
Like you're just not going to wake up one day cured of a mental health illness or disorder, mental illness or disorder. This is not how it works. But if you're not talking about it, you'll never get that help. The help's there, and between medication and therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, there's so much that can be done. But if you never start doing it, like that's where those tragic endings can happen. So going back to where was I at?
You're 13 and you started drinking.
Talking about drinking. So yeah, I mean, I got in big trouble with drinking when I was, like between 8th and 9th grade. That's what, yeah, I mean, I was familiar with drinking, and if you're around drinking all your life and you watch your parents do it, this is something interesting that from my experience, at least, you really don't understand, and you have a really weird relationship with it. Like the amounts that I thought were normal to drink, and I thought something all adults did was come home after work and pour a glass of whiskey, not a shot or something on the rocks. I'm just a full glass of it, like it was fucking water. I thought that was just part of like the boxes you check during the day when you're an adult. I thought that adults drank while driving. I thought that was normal to have a glass of wine while driving around to dinner. I thought that was just like, oh, cool. When you're older, you do that. So I just had this like really distorted perception of what was normal. And I started experimenting with it. And like, dude, I can still remember the feeling that I had when the first feeling I can remember having when alcohol first soaked into my bloodstream was like, I was 12, and it was intoxicating, like to a degree that I know now looking back was a major red flag. Like it felt like I was 12, and it felt like the thing I'd been missing for 12 years. It was, and I was really excited to explore that. I mean, I wanted to know, because when you're that young, it's hard to get that much. You're sneaking little bits here and there from water bottles that people filled up at their parents' bars. And I just remember being so excited to explore that. And when I first did, I didn't know how much to drink. Like me and one guy, this is the first time I remember getting blacked out. Me and one guy were like lanky, skinny 13-year-olds. We split a fifth of vodka because I'm like, well, I don't know, let's get a fifth. And we drank the whole thing. We're somewhere after 8th grade. So, I mean, that's an amount that, like, I don't know, man, that's, I don't know, that could probably kill some people. No doubt.
Absolutely.
And some awful things happened that night that actually scared me so much, cost me a lot of friends in my community. I ended up changing schools. And
can you share what happened that night?
Another time, our next meeting, we're gonna go to that.
Will we read that in the book?
It is in the book.
Okay.
It is 100% in the book. And the thing was just like, that scared me enough to take a few years off of drinking. And I was like, so I'm in 9th grade and 10th grade, and I'm like, I can't touch this stuff. Like, it's crazy. And then, like, coincidentally, I started doing really well in school. It's like why I did great in school, I think, in high school, and got into a great college because I like was terrified of alcohol, just terrified of it. So I like kind of took up homework as like a homework and extracurriculars, like that became what I was obsessed with. But so drinking, like, fell back into it big time in college because I was starting to feel these periods of time, a few days at a time, where I was just so depressed and anxious and panic ridden over nothing at all. And drinking was the way out of that. And it felt fine and it felt great. And I got really used to it. And even when I was feeling high and manic, drinking was great too. It just makes those sensations feel even better. You're like, damn, I'm feeling on top of the world. I'm literally an invincible person. I could drink and drink and never drop. And so drinking was fun then too. So I just basically started drinking no matter how I was feeling. Um, and so I learned that behavior. And then, so like, fast forward few more years, and now I'm out of college and I'm in like my early 20s. And that's when the symptoms were like at their heaviest and onsetting to the fullest capacity. And then all of a sudden, these days of feeling despondent became weeks. And it wasn't any longer despondent. It was me questioning. It was me being so scared of how awful I was feeling and being in so much pain that I was questioning if I wanted to be alive or not. That's where I had gotten to. So now I'm like 22 and 23, and in my worst moments, these episodes, they gripped me in a way that, like, I shudder to think about it now, 20 years later. Because when you're in the middle of a depressive episode, and dude, this is why I think it's really hard to talk about this stuff, is because it's really hard to explain. And if you tell somebody, like, you try to explain to someone how depressed you were, and on the other end of that, if someone's never experienced it, they can't see it, they can't touch it, they can't. It doesn't come to fruition the same way, and people are scared that when they explain that, people are gonna hear weakness or hear fear or hear, you know, something defective. And it's whereas, like, if I have a broken leg,
Yeah.
it'd be like, oh, Kevin, I broke my leg snowboarding, and you'd be like, Dave, you should go get
Get that
crutches.
checked out.
Yeah, your shit is wobbling. Like, go to the doctor. And you don't question my toughness or my composure or my makeup. You're just like, dude broke his leg. What a badass. He was he was hitting down a black diamond. But with mental health, it's different, because if I'm scared that you're going to judge me for being fragile or weak or some fucked up notion of like what's not masculine, right? Then I'm not going to tell you how I'm feeling, and I'm going to pretend, and I'm going to self-medicate, and I'm going to go through life that way. And so I think that's where I was at. And I think it's where a lot of particularly young people are at, is there's not feeling a safe space to talk about it and be vulnerable.
Now, I spent 30 years on the radio. 25 of those were on morning radio program with the same partner for 25 years. And he never understood it until something happened to him late in our career together. And he's like, dude, he goes, I never understood why you couldn't just wake up and be happy. He goes, but since this thing happened to me, he goes, now I get it. And he goes, I'm sorry. He goes, I never understood it. And that's what you were getting ready. That's what you were saying was it's hard to articulate how we feel
Oh,
just
yeah.
at the drop of a hat.
No, it proved nearly impossible, and it proved nearly deadly to me, honestly. And so, yes, and so the thing about these episodes when they hit, and if to everyone listening, if you've never felt this, the really uncanny thing about a depressive episode is like, no matter how many you have, and no matter how much sort of intellectual cognitive understanding that it's an episode, when you're actually in it, you lose all sense of it being temporary. You lose all sense of like, okay, I'm going through an episode. In 3 to 8 days, this cycle will be over. I just, it's all good. This is normal. This is what's happening. It's characteristic of my condition. I will survive. That's all out the window. And it's like you forget everything you know, and you truly believe in those moments that is how you will feel for the rest of your life. And that sounds hard to imagine, but it's imagine waking up imagine Groundhog's Day and waking up every day and it being the exact same day. You believe it's going to be like that. You just think, okay, I feel so bad. This is the worst day of my life. If every day felt like this, I wouldn't want to be alive. And every day will feel like this. Therefore, I don't know if I want to be alive. It's like, it's that basic and elemental. Um, so I started, oh, go ahead.
That's the thing that keeps me alive, is that thought that how I feel right now, if I end my life right now, will I feel like that for eternity? That's what keeps me alive. You know, it
Yeah.
does. Because I fear the afterlife. If you know, if we die of natural causes, you know, we had no hand in that. But what if it's punishment in the afterlife for ending it on our own accord? You know,
Yeah.
and that I've talked to many therapists about that, and they're like, hold on to that thought. If it keeps you alive, hold on to that thought. And you're right. It is a cycle and it does end. But what you're talking about, the 3 to 8 days that you're underwater and you just have a Niagara Falls cascading on you for those 3 to 8 days. You can't breathe. You can't move. It's absolutely debilitating.
Yeah, it's absolutely debilitating, and that's where I was getting to. These episodes were getting worse and worse, and um, I don't know if it's something I learned from my dad or from like doing fucking crew at 5 in the morning, but I had a pain tolerance, or sort of a. It was a little masochistic. It was a little bit of like a misconception of toughness, but I had an ability to like just stomach as much as I could, whether it was like just getting through the day and going to work and doing things. I did my best to just cover this thing up, and like, so but eventually it's just too much. And what happened to me was like, all right, so my job at the time, it's just ironic that this was my job, but I was in social work. I worked with at-risk kids. So these were kids that were, um, they were in the foster care system and they were in the juvenile justice system. Okay, so this was a facility for kids that had come out of those programs. So all these kids, like the majority of these kids had significant trauma in their life. Um, this was a high stress, demanding environment to work in, and it was a residential treatment facility. So I literally lived there, and I lived. It was a 24-hour a day job. I mean, I went to bed, but if the kids woke up, then, I go back down.
You're on call, man.
100%. And in a way, the job helped me because I couldn't. I was never really. I was by myself so sparingly, and I was always called into action. And I had a motor. Like I could function and um, jump into working with these kids, and it would be breaking up a fight, or it would be talking to somebody who had like tried to run away. Um, it was pretty much always crisis management, in that it sort of helped me because I just always had something to fixate on. But you can't really run away from yourself like forever.
No.
My routine was like I got up at 6 and woke the kids up shortly there as soon as I had my coffee. And, usually it wasn't until 1 a.m. that I would even get back to my little cabin. And my routine was like, okay, I'm so wired. My mind is racing. I'm having thoughts in my head they're scary and they're so weird. And I need to have a drink and then I'll sleep. And then I'd sleep for a few hours from like 2:30 or 1 to 2:30 until 6. And that was it. And I did this like for weeks and months and months. Um, and then eventually I had I had a couple days off. I remember I had worked like a long stretch. It was like 2 weeks, and my co-counselor had just quit, and I was kind of just flying solo. Um, but I was killing it. I think I was kicking ass, and like the supervisors were like, "Wow, you've got your group like running, and everybody's in line, and they're the best group, cleaning up their shit. Like they're doing a good job." And it all looked good to them, but I was breaking on the
Mhm.
inside. I was the thoughts I was having, if I was standing next to somebody, if I was standing next to another one of the kids or another staff member there, I would obsess about like I would think I was going to hurt them. I would think that I was going to do something violent or insane. I would think about every time a car drove by, I just thought that I was going to jump in front of it. Every time we were in, I was taking these kids, we used to go like on canoe trips, and I would just stare at the water, thinking, "Oh, I'm literally terrified that I'm going to jump in and drown myself right now." I just couldn't. I was breaking on the inside, 100%. And then finally, so I had these couple days
Probably
off.
because you were drinking and you weren't getting any sleep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dude, without your thoughts, that could have killed you.
Yeah, I was in really bad shape. I had lost. I mean, I probably lost like 25 pounds because I didn't really eat that much.
Uh-huh.
And I was sort of always so anxious. I never really had an appetite. And I was just running, dude. I was just running and running and running away from myself. And
Well, and that I was talking to somebody the other day about bipolar disorder, which is depression and mania. Okay, and it's just what cycle are you in? And I think, and I said this to that person, I said I think sometimes manic episodes are worse than depressive episodes because you do some stupid shit when you're when you're manic mode.
oh yeah, no, there's no doubt about it. I mean, and some of the more typical ones that you kind of that you read about, and these are the ones that people can kind of understand. Like you spend all your money, like that's a real thing.
That is a real thing.
Oh, I barely made any, and I had maxed out credit cards that I wouldn't have been able to pay them off in years. Like I don't know what I was doing. I would just maxed out every credit card. I spent every dollar I could on shit. Like I spent a lot of it on alcohol, but it was like I bought all these clothes. I bought all this crap, like stuff I never would touch. Um, Gifts for people that like they didn't want. It was just it's really strange. It sounds illogical, but
It is illogical.
yeah, it is illogical. But when you're in the moment, it just seems like the thing that you have to do.
Exactly.
So okay, so here was the inflection point. Like here's where like my whole life changed.
That's what I wanted to find out. When did you decide enough is enough?
Oh no, I'm not even like not for a while. Not for a while.
Oh, geez. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, no. This is just when things started to really go south.
Ah,
So I had worked this stretch and I had a couple of days off, but like instead of being tired like I should have been, I was like, I'm still running. I have all this energy. My mind is racing. Maybe I should. This was my idea. I was like, maybe I should ride 50 miles on my bike. And then I should go for like a long, like 13-mile run. And that'll put me to sleep finally. And so my first day off, and I'm exhausted and I'm now nourished and I haven't slept. And I have this idea that I should go. And that wasn't really shit I did. Like I was in good shape and I ran and I did stuff, but I wasn't like doing triathlons and spending the entire day on my bike. I just was an idea that I had. So I did it. And I felt like, oh man, I'm a god right now. I'm sailing through the hills and like the wind in my face and I'm inhaling the road in front of me and breathing it out behind me. I just thought that I was like just this, I don't know, like on top of the world. And I remember at the end, I finally got back and it was the run. So I've been like out running and biking for the entirety of the day. And I remember the end of the run, I was like, oh, cool. I think I finally, not like in pain, but like I'm numb. Like I think I finally ran out of energy. This is great. I'll be able to sleep like a baby tonight. And I didn't drink that night. I didn't need anything to drink that night. I just fell into like the darkest, longest, like the kind of sleep where you don't have any dreams because your mind is just like it is on E. And just like that, I woke up next morning, the sun comes through the windows, and I knew within seconds, like I knew within a moment that this was I was about to begin, and I had just begun the worst episode I'd ever had in my life. I knew in that moment this was the worst I had ever felt. I knew that this would be unlike anything I'd ever gone through, and immediately was obsessed with the idea that I needed to end my life. That was the only way out of this pain. And so it's like 7 a.m. and I have like feel my mind is racing. Every second that passes feels long. Like the day will never end because you're feeling like this. And my first thought was like, I need someone around me because I'm going to do something if I'm alone. So I went and like, I lived at even on my days off, I was still there. So I lived there at work. So I went and found my boss, and he was the first person I thought of. And I went to his office because I needed someone to like, I
You
touched
just
me
got
from
to
his
lay it
arm.
out on them. You just got to you got to release this negative energy somewhere.
It was more like I was just scared to be alone
Yeah.
and someone to distract me in some way, to like put their arm around me or say something or engage with me in any way would help me in that moment. And I go in and he's like, Dave, hey, and I couldn't even talk, and I just start tears pouring down my face, and I'm like choking and I can't talk. And he immediately knew, like, he'd never seen anything like this from me. And so he's just like, hang on, I'm gonna go get Mike. All right. And Mike is a psychologist that works there. He works with the kids, but he's like, I'm going to go get Mike. Like, I know
Yeah.
within a second that you need to talk to Mike. And so he leaves, but like, I couldn't sit in this office. And so I just start wandering around, and I eventually find some space, in the back of all the buildings in the woods, in this kind of little abandoned area that, we would hang out in sometimes. And we always had a knife on us because this was like an outdoor, it was like outdoor therapy. So we always had a utility knife on us, um, clipped to our belt. And I was alone in the woods, and um, the only I had this thought, and it felt all of a sudden felt clear and made total sense. The pain will leave. Um, the pain will leave if I cut myself and I bleed it out. I thought the pain will leave in a stream of blood. That's the way out of this. And so I took the knife out, like I read in the beginning, and I touched it up against my skin, and I pressed down. And I remember the last thought I had was the fucking weirdest thought. It was like, skin's resilient. It's like, it's a little more leathery than people think. We're not that fragile. It has a toughness to it, and it stretches and it contorts. And I had that thought, and I pressed down a little harder. And then Mike found me, and he tackled me from behind, and he brought me to the ground. And the next thing I know, I woke up in the hospital.
Wow.
I just blacked out in his arms, and he got me in his car, and I was obviously awake. I got into his vehicle and I walked through this facility, but I don't remember any of it. I was completely blacked out.
You
And
just hit upon something that in our earlier part of this conversation, we were talking about trying to describe our depression pain to somebody who doesn't understand it and doesn't have to deal with it. I think because I was a cutter in high school too. Okay. That was something I did to relieve the pain. What you were talking about, let's let it bleed out.
mm-hmm.
Imagine if you are, and I'm talking to the audience now, imagine that you just wake up one day and you just start taking a razor blade to your arm. How
Mm-hmm.
comfortable would that be? It wouldn't be very comfortable. Well,
No,
imagine that 10 times harder. That's what we feel on our worst days.
yeah, and imagine that you were actually drawn to it. That seemed like the answer to a really hard question.
Exactly.
And so I woke up in the hospital, and I had, like I said, a tag on my wrist, and I was in a psychiatric hospital, and I'd been put there involuntarily. And yeah, I was there for 2 weeks, and like within within a day or two of talking to the doctors there, and um, I mean, they medicate you good. Like, they medicate you very, very heavily right away. And it's, I mean, I was like a zombie, but they do that. I mean, their very first step is safety, right? So they're like, okay, you're going to be on, they put you, in my case, it was antipsychotics, and it's basically to sedate you, and you're a zombie, but you're not going to hurt yourself. That's their first step. And then
Sure.
from there, it's figuring out what's going on with you. So after some conversations with doctors, they're like, it's what you've been suffering from is in all likelihood bipolar disorder, and it's alternating phases of mania and depression. And what you're describing like fits that very, very clearly. And I'm like, on the one hand, I remember feeling kind of relieved, right? Because, dude, I just thought I was going crazy this whole time when I'm having these thoughts and I'm running around and I'm swinging back and forth on this crazy emotional like roller coaster. I just thought I was losing my mind. I thought that the person that I had been when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, and I was doing good in school and rowing crew, I just thought that he was long gone and that I was a crazy person. Like I didn't know anything else. And I remember feeling a little relieved that like, okay, it's got a name. Like it's a thing. Other people have it. It's in the DSM or whatever. It's got
Well, it has a
some
title now, and now you know how to attack
title.
it.
Yeah, but on the other hand, so I'm like sort of relieved that at least there's a language around this that people speak. But on the other hand, my immediate thought, and keep in mind, I just had the worst day of my life, and I'm lucky to be alive, and I'm in a psychiatric hospital. And one of the first thoughts I had was, oh man, like what if people find out about this? What if they think I'm weak? And like, how in the fuck is that the first thing I went to? And
Right?
I don't blame myself for that. What I put that on is just something that we're kind of programmed and brought up to believe, particularly as like young men in this country and in a lot of demographics, is just like you're tough no matter what, and like sadness is sort of something for the weak, or depression is something for the fragile. Like some of this bullshit notions that we were kind of programmed with. Um, and so here I am, and I'm like fucking lucky to be alive. And my first thought is like, oh my god, what if someone finds out? You know,
Yeah,
and
like
I had begun seeing I had begun seeing somebody, and more on her later. But like I had begun seeing someone, and so I had a girlfriend who worked there too, and I had been trying so hard to keep myself buttoned up around her. Like all I wanted to do was for her to not know that like all this stuff was happening in my mind. And I remember thinking like, oh God, like what if she hears? What if she finds out? Like she's gonna think I'm nuts. Um, and yeah, so I'm in this place, and like I spent 2 weeks there, and I learned a little bit. And you know, I every day we talked to doctors, and there was some CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. There was group sessions. There were all this stuff, and I participated. But you know, and one of the key things they tell you, and which is 100% true, is that like abusing drugs and alcohol will absolutely trigger these episodes
sure,
and absolutely make them worse.
they're
And
depressives. They're
yeah, so
depressants.
like, when I left, I had like an instruction manual. It's like, okay, you take this mood stabilizer, this antidepressant, and this antipsychotic. I had been subscribed these three things, um, and do this every day at this time. And then no matter what, like drugs and alcohol are a real. We really advise you stay away from them. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna take the pills for sure. But like other than that, like no, I just couldn't really wrap my head around the idea that I was sick or had something debilitating or had like I just perceived it as a weakness. And so I kind of just like pretended that none of this had ever happened. And I went back to work, and I did take my pills, and like my girlfriend did know. Um,
How did she
and
react?
well, here's the thing about her, dude. Like I mentioned in the beginning, my partner, that girl is my wife today.
That's
And,
awesome.
and we have a family, and we have a life together. And she went through hell with me, dude. And she's an amazing person. If it weren't for her, I tell you for sure, I wouldn't be here right now. I don't mean not here interviewing and talking to you. I wouldn't be here, period.
No, that's
Uh,
my wife is the person that I feel the most sorry for on this planet because she has to deal with me.
yeah, but look at you now, and the person you are now, and who she waited around for, and it's worth it. You know,
Yeah,
I'm sure she feels that way. There's no
I
doubt.
hope.
I believe she does. Um, so I got out of the hospital, and that was just the beginning. That was the beginning of about a decade of okay, I have an illness, but I'm not talking about it. I'll take my pills, but like I'm just gonna pretend that I can like stomach this thing. And we moved to California after we finished working there, and got an apartment, and both found some jobs, and I just started, and now I'm in the city, and like I'm not working 24 hours a day. And now it is really easy to find alcohol and drugs whenever I'm feeling any kind of way. And I started drinking a lot more, and I was already drinking a lot. I started drinking a lot more. I started drinking a much higher volume when I was drinking. And over the course of years, drinking like wasn't just like taking the edge off or having like 3 glasses of wine or six. It was, I came to understand drinking as consuming alcohol to the point of unconsciousness. That was, if I'm drinking tonight, that means just going and going and going until my body and mind shut off.
Wow.
That's what going out to drink was. It wasn't anything less than that. It was never like, cool, let's have a few beers and then go dance. It was like, no, we're gonna keep drinking the entire night until we are stumbling and almost unconscious or blacked out. That was sort of the process, and I did this more and more. And by this time, like whether because my because of my condition or because of the medication and swirling all this shit together, when I drank, like I was a bad customer. I got I got very very aggressive. I always got angry. All the pain that I was feeling, it just spilled out.
Mhm.
It go figure, right?
Yeah, right.
But
Exactly.
and so I always got aggressive. I often got into fights. I ended up getting arrested and put in jail on 3 different occasions. And like I'm lucky I went to jail because who knows what would have happened the rest of those nights if I was like out in the fucking world.
Yeah.
Um,
Were they PI, public intoxication arrests, or were they for fighting?
Both.
Wow.
2 of them were for fighting, and one of them was for public intoxication.
Yeah.
And one of the fights that I got was with a cop.
No kidding.
Yeah. So
Did you win?
no, not at all, man.
I had to
No.
ask that.
I'm sure I thought that I was going to, and I'm sure I felt absolutely just engrossed with the sensation that like what I was doing was the right thing to do, and I'm sure the people on looking at me and watching me just on the street getting handcuffed were like, "Wow, dude, this is fucking sad,"
Yeah.
And it sucks to think about because like when this stuff happened, like I was with people, I was with friends, I was with people that still knew the person they knew in college who was like a sweet kid and oftentimes very exuberant and gregarious, to use the word you use. And so they were sticking with me, but like people were kind of disappearing from my life because one of the times I got arrested, like the guy I was with got arrested too, just because he was with me. He didn't do anything at all, but it was like, well, like, we're arresting this guy. Like, you're coming too. It was,
Guilt
my
by
room.
association.
Yeah. So I got like one of my best friends, like he had to spend the night in jail because of me. He didn't do anything wrong other than go out with me. Um, and things went like this for years. And all of a sudden, like, and work is going very badly and relationships are disappearing. And my girlfriend, the same one who's like trying desperately you know, to help me and cling on to the person she knows is inside me somewhere. She's like, I can't do this anymore. I can't watch this from up close. Like I can't not know if you're going to come home or if you're safe or if you're hurt. And she had one foot out the door. Um, and I was deteriorating. And at that point I was pretty ready for her to go. Not like I wanted her to, but in a way,
Kind of just to save herself.
yeah. Here's the thing about being addicted to something. Like that is always going to be your first love. Like that is going to be the relationship and the partner that you're most loyal to. So like you could be married, you can have a girlfriend, but you're the love that you have is always sort of illusory. It's always going to be second place to what you're addicted to. You go out to dinner, and I remember this so clearly. Like you go out to dinner, and your wife or your boyfriend or whoever is talking to you and they're telling you about how they feel about their day or whatever. And the only thing on your mind is, how can I get another glass of wine here without interrupting her? Maybe I'll have to go to the bathroom. And I used to take flasks with me when I went out with her so that I could go to the bathroom and drink without her knowing that I was like constantly getting.
Wow.
And yeah, and like that's not a relationship. And
No.
that's like, and so that's the position I had put her in, and like absolutely loved her to death, but like I was not willing to give up alcohol because it was the thing that it was the lifeline that it was certain, and I knew that like I could count on it, and it would make me feel a certain way every time, and it wouldn't question me, and it wouldn't abandon me, and it was always there for me, and I was kind of like the image I have of myself at this time was like I was hanging off a cliff with one finger, just kind of waiting for something or someone to just pry it off.
Sure.
And the and so then like here's the next inflection point in my life, and then I'll take a pause. I went out one night, and at this point, like a lot of people had kind of, she was one foot out the door. A lot of my friends were pretty wary of being with me, particularly at night. Um, and I went out and I found some people to hang out with, people that were out of town, that didn't really know me anymore, and they didn't know who I was, so they were just kind of excited to hang out. Um, and when you're drinking that much, this is counterintuitive that people don't realize, but you actually start blacking out a lot earlier, and um, you start experiencing blackouts after like a much less volume, and so
Is that because you
getting.
still have a lot more in your system still?
It's just part of the condition of being alcoholic is you just
Okay.
like your memory and your cognition just gets shitty, and so you'll function, but your memory is just starting to really go to shit, and so you might stop remembering things after 5 drinks where it used to be 10, or 10 drinks when it used to be 15. Um, you're still walking around and you're still functional. You're just like your memory is really starting to take a beat. And so people talk about blacking out, and like you always remember something when when you say blacked out. It's kind of a euphemism for it's a euphemism for 95% unconscious, but you always remember like, oh yeah, and then we got pizza at that place. Oh yeah, yeah, and then I took a cab to, and I saw this fucking guy, and you have 4 or 5 little things, and then you start to like chain the night together, and you kind of inventory a couple things, and you have like, all right, I got the summary. I know everything that happened was in these parameters, so like we're good to go. This was entirely different. This was a night where the I refer to it as like pages completely torn out of a book. And I remember going out, and I remember drinking a ton, and I remember thinking, I'm gonna drown myself in a sea of fucking alcohol tonight because I just was done. And that was it. I remember dancing to a song, having a cigarette, and then nothing. And I woke up, who knows, 10 hours passed, and I woke up and I was on my couch, and I couldn't remember a thing. And all of a sudden I start looking around and feeling my body, and I have all these bruises and cuts, and I have this blood all over me, and got a cut on my head, on my hands, and I'm like, I have no idea. When you get hurt that much, you can usually remember like, oh, I got to fight. I couldn't have the faintest clue what had happened to me. It looked like I could have gotten in a fight or fallen down a set of stairs. I had no idea.
Car wreck?
And absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. So then I'm like, oh, fuck. Well, how did I get home? I have no idea how I got home, but I know that the last thing I remember, I was like on the other side of town. And I was started to, I mean, I hate to admit this, but it's true. And I have to be honest with myself and with you. Like I used to drive drunk all the time. Like there's no doubt about it. And a lot of people do. And you drive buzzed, you drive drunk, hopefully you don't drive in the kind of condition where you couldn't walk, but I definitely did. And I started thinking, man, did I drive home? And I'm looking around, and I'm like, I find my keys, and I have no recollection of being in a bus, and I don't have any like receipts from a cab. It's just back in the day when you got paper receipts for everything. And I'm starting to think like maybe I drove home. Oh my God. And I start running around my neighborhood. I'm like jogging, looking for my car, just hoping to God I don't find my car.
Sure.
And I go a few blocks, and sure enough, I see like the silver bumper that I'm afraid to see. And it's my car, and I'm like, my heart sinks, and I'm imagining all of the awful things that might have happened. And I get to my car, and like there's blood on the door, and there's blood inside the car, and I'm like praying to fucking God that it's mine, right? I'm like, I have no idea what happened, and I just pray that I'm the only person hurt right now. Um, and I run inside, and I'm like going online, and I'm like, I was going to the SFPD website, and I'm looking at, was there any accidents or reported hit and runs? And I'm trying to find. That's where I was at. Like I thought maybe something awful like that had happened, awful involving somebody else.
Yeah.
And I didn't find anything, and I come to the conclusion like, okay, I didn't hurt anybody. This is my blood, and like I got back into my car after whatever the fuck happened out there. But that was it, because as obvious as it is now, at the time, I would not let myself believe that I was hurting other people. And not because I wasn't, it's because your mind is the cleverest fucking thing. And it will twist reality, and you can convince yourself of all the bullshit in the world in order to get your fix, in order to not break the habit that is causing harm. Your mind will protect itself, and it will let you keep doing a bad thing. Um, and I had never believed like I'm going to hurt somebody. I just couldn't accept that obvious reality. And all of a sudden, that morning, I just pictured everything. I saw myself. I saw my friends like devastated at like watching me get arrested. I saw myself driving around the city, drunk or blacked out, and putting like everybody in my path in jeopardy. I saw my partner watching this up close, like she said, just wondering if I was going to make it home. Um, and I realized for the first time, this isn't about me. Like, this isn't about how far I'm going to go and if I'm going to fall off that cliff. This is about who I'm going to take fucking with me. And who am I to like destroy someone else's world? Who am I to like drive through the city drunk and maybe hurt somebody or kill somebody? Who am I to destroy that person's world?
That's a heavy thought, man. Wow.
And like once I had that thought, and I understood the gravity of the situation, I knew it crystallized that I needed to stop. Like, because I was okay with hurting myself. I really was.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I was okay with giving up, and I didn't have career going. I didn't like have a lot of things going. My girlfriend, I think, was essentially done. And that moment, though, I remember within hours I was driving. I was driving over the Bay Bridge from San Francisco to the East Bay, and I was clear. Okay, something's changing now. And I talked to my partner, and I'm like, look, don't leave. Give me another fucking chance. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do this for you. I'm gonna do this for me. I'm gonna do this for all the people who I've hurt, and just give me one more chance and help me see this through. And like, I promise I'm gonna do this. And she helped me get checked into a chemical dependency recovery program. This was in days of like that night. And I met this counselor there, and this was like she's another like angel that I'm lucky came through my life at some point. And this counselor, she was a clinical psychologist, and I met with her, and I told her, for like 20 minutes, I told her like the story that I've told you and all the shit that's happened, and what I went through at going all the way back to, the psychiatric hospital. And dude, she told me straight up, she's like, you got to stop or you're going to fucking die. She told me straight up that I would not survive. And she'd only known me for 20 minutes.
There you go.
And she told me I was going to die. She's like, it might be all of a sudden, or it might be you just wither away, but like you are not going to survive at this rate. And I she barely knew me, but I believed her because of her experience, because of, I don't know, because I was ready to
Maybe
receive
because of the
it.
way she said it.
The way she said it, everything. The moment that I was in, I was also ready to receive it, and
Yeah.
so I believed it. And she's like, you don't need to make this decision right now, what the rest of your life is going to look like. But I want you to give yourself 30 days. I want you to stop drinking for 30 days and take care of yourself. Take your pills every morning. Don't drink. Just walk this line with me for 30 days. And I was like, okay, like I can do that. I'm good. No, I'm going to do that. And I made that commitment, and um, I told my partner, and I did it. And all of a sudden, like, things were really starting to come into focus. And I knew that I wanted to keep going. And so what I did, and this is the best thing I ever did, and everybody should do this. You like the phrase like accountability partners, where like you set a goal, but you got to share it with other people,
Yeah.
so that in case you let yourself down, other people are there that you don't let down. So what I did, um, and I had this idea, and I was impulsive. I didn't think it through, and if I thought more about it, I probably wouldn't have done it. But like, I had this idea one morning. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna email everybody I know. Like, I'm gonna email Kevin. I'm gonna email everybody whose fucking name is in my Gmail saved, contacts, and I'm gonna tell them what's going on. And I because I want to scream this from the mountaintop, and I want everyone to keep receipts, and I want to, because I knew I could let myself down, but like I'd always been a good friend and I'd always been a good teammate, and I knew that like if I was if I was backed into a corner and I needed to help somebody out, I knew I wouldn't let him down. And so I wrote this email, and I I woke up with blood all over me the other day. I told him quickly what event had brought me to this point. I know I'm going to hurt somebody. I know I'm going to hurt myself or all of you, and I know I need to stop, and I need to not have a drop of alcohol in me for 6 months, a year. I don't know, maybe forever. And I wrote that very deliberately. I said maybe forever because I had the courage. I had the fucking courage at that moment to put that commitment out there, and because I knew that I could not back down. If I tell you I'm going to do something, I know
Yeah.
I'm going to do it.
Yeah. If you write it or say it, it's in stone. You can't go back on it.
Yeah, yeah. And so, and I sent it, and like hitting send on that email is crazy, but I sent it, and that night was the last. That was like 12 years ago. It was the last time I've ever had a drink of alcohol. That
What
was
was the
25.
reaction from your friends, the people who received that? What was the reaction?
Oh my God, dude! People were so supportive. They were like, I mean, everybody wrote me back and was like, you know, this is the most amazing thing I've seen, I've heard. I'm so proud of you. Like, let me know what you need. That's what everybody said, is let me know what you need. Do you want to go to a movie? Do you want to go for a walk? Let's go to the gym. Like, whatever you need to help you do this, I'm game. Let's go. Let's go see Fast and Furious 3, because that's what was out then. Let's go do anything you want to help you do this. And yeah, and my partner, like, she kept 10 toes down for me, and she stayed with me, and she like took me to these appointments. I kept going to the chemical dependency recovery program for 6 months, just to go talk to to the same counselor, and to do their group meetings. I don't know if it was every day, like very often. And I was taking my pills every morning and trying, and going to my psychiatry appointments and starting to really like, okay, I also got to think about the thing that's going to make this easier is if I'm doing a better job caring for my bipolar disorder, which will help me not want to drink as much in the first place.
Sure.
And I just started climbing this mountain, and I started doing like I was in bad shape, like physically. I just was like felt and looked like shit, and I had used to be in great shape, and but I didn't care about going running anymore when I was living this life. But now I'm like, okay, I started going to the gym at night because I would start going to the gym during the times when I usually was drinking.
Uh-huh.
Okay, Saturday, and there was a 24-hour gym, like 24-hour fitness, and some of them are actually open 24 hours. And I go to this gym on Saturday. I went a lot, but I always made sure to go on Saturday night, and around midnight, because I'm like, this is when I'm at a bar. This is when I'm fully loaded, and let me just like lift these weights. Let me go. Let me hit the treadmill. And eventually, I started playing basketball with this. It was this crew of guys, and I always wondered like why they were there. And we didn't like we just knew each other on the court, and we always played. It's like the same group every Saturday night, and we always played basketball until like 1 in the morning. And we didn't talk about it, like we just played hoops. And but I always wondered, looking back, I'm like, I wonder if they were there for like, I wonder if some of those dudes were there for the same reason, if they were
Could
kind
very
of
well have
dealing with
been.
shit, and if they were there for a similar reason. And but it was this place where we just connected, and it was this place that was there for me at this time when uh, so I was relearning behaviors. I was relearning how to just to go through a day or a week or a month without drinking, and understand that I had an illness that I needed to care for, and that it could get easier to manage if I cared for it. Um, and I mean, that started a long journey. And like um, within a year, things are starting to look amazing. And it was like with the relationship, it was like we met again we've been together for 10 years. It was like we met each other for the first time, is how I like would express, is how I express it. It was like the thing was almost dead. And all of a sudden, like water and sunlight, it just blossomed again. And we got a new place. Like we got out of the place that we had been living. I started doing good at work, and like career started to like go in a direction. Within like a year or 2 years, we were engaged and we got married. And like that was one of the like three or so best days of my life. And all my friends were there, all my family were there, like the same friends that had like seen me getting hauled into a police car, and but had stuck with me through all this shit and like the hell I probably put them through. They were all there, like my groomsmen, and it was amazing. And then like a year after that, I like without even trying, just from being healthy and caring for myself and getting therapy and not using, and not drinking and not using, all of a sudden like career is blossoming, and that's taken off. And I had this idea, like maybe I could start my own company. And I had a real estate license, and I'd been working, doing a shitty job and like barely putting together enough money, but I had been working as a real estate company. And, so that was the work I was in. And I just had this idea, like maybe I can do my own company. And I don't know, I was just like kind of riding high, and I had all this momentum, and I keep hitting these green lights. And so I did it, and I like got a sublet and shared an office with this guy. And I didn't really know what I was doing. Like I had two clients and, a computer and a phone, like that was it. Um, but I just felt like this new me, the one like that's not drinking and that's caring for himself, and beginning to understand that like I can be super happy and super successful with bipolar, that it's not a weakness, that it's not something I have to self-medicate. I was just like, I'm gonna kick ass, fuck it. And yeah, and then it was like two clients and four clients and eight clients, and then I got, you know, uh, hired someone, and then I hired another person, and like that was in like 2012. Um, and now we have a team of like 50 people, and here at this company, and I've got like an amazing group that I get to run this company with, and share that with every day, and it's amazing. And like I just think, um, I just think how like poof, and it could be gone if I hadn't had the courage to make that change. Like this disappears, you know,
Yeah.
my family disappears, and I have an overwhelming raw sense of gratitude for what I have right now, because I know how easy it could all just disappear. And then I think like the happiest day is, a year and a half ago, and um, my wife and I had a baby, and it's the same person that saw me in the hospital, that picked me up from jail, that watched me just drag myself through the fucking mud, that didn't give up on me We had a baby, and like he's amazing, and he is he is he is absolutely magnificent in every single way, and and that's the journey, and um, it all started that morning when like I finally had the ability to be vulnerable enough to say I have a massive problem and I need to receive help and I need to be open about it and I need to tell people what's going on. Um, or like I'm not going to survive, just like my counselor said.
So four things I want to touch upon here. Sorry. Um, Many addicts trade alcohol and substance abuse for another addiction. Would you say that work in your company is your addiction now?
It was for sure. Like oh, dude, I became like very much a workaholic and, um, uh, very obsessive about it. And yeah, I definitely, and my wife and a lot of people would definitely point out like, dude, get off your phone. Like it's like I'd be at like a football game, emailing something, literally like at the 49ers game, and I'm like trying to tackle some work stuff. But and it's like there's phases of this shit. Like the work has been up and down, but like steadily gaining every year. And like I didn't know how to be a CEO when I started. I just printed that on a business card, but I didn't know what that meant yet. Um, I didn't know what a leader was. I grew into it through learning and failing a lot, um, and went through the phases of like, yeah, being a workaholic and micromanaging myself. Um, so it's been a process to get to this point where I'm at, but I don't feel like I'm addicted to work anymore.
So the process, the ebbs and flows, sometimes they're great. And then, like you said, sometimes you feel like a failure.
Yeah,
How does that not affect your bipolar disorder?
it does.
I'm
It does.
sure it does.
Yeah. Um, and that's been the biggest change for me has been, um, and I've had ongoing therapy for years. Like I started therapy, back at this point in time, and I met with that counselor for 6 months, and then I got another therapist, and I've had the same therapist now for quite a few years, and so a lot of work has been put into this, but the one thing I've learned that's what he calls it and what I'll call it is just, um, managing my emotional responses and understanding my condition and like stepping outside of it, watching what happens when events trigger certain thoughts and feelings, but watching it from a distance and saying like, okay, here's an example for you. Like, let's say I've been working on a deal, trying to get a client and put together some big, you know, uh, client engagement. Let's say I want to work with this person and help them buy some buildings and do some deals, and we want to manage their building, all that stuff. Let's say it falls through, right? And they say, yeah, you know what, Dave, we're going with Kevin. We're going to go with Kevin and his company. The challenge in that moment and the thing that would absolutely wreck me when that happened was I would go from I would crash so hard in that moment, and it wasn't just like shit, this is a shitty day, but like whatever. Let's tomorrow will be fine. Let me just get over it. It wasn't like that at all. It was like you are the worst business owner and you are the worst business and you're the worst CEO and you're the shittiest real estate professional that there is. And like, what are you even doing in this industry? That's where I would go in those moments. And what I learned over time, and it's really hard. Like this wasn't just like, oh, revelation. Like this takes a ton of practice. But what I learned was like, okay, step one, understand that I'm going to feel that way, that it is who I am. I'm going to have a super extreme reaction, and let it flow through you. Don't try to like be someone you're not, and don't try to fight it too hard. Just understand like some of those thoughts are going to hit. Okay, that's step one. Don't fight too hard when that happens. Step two, after I've let that run its course a little bit, step back and do a reality check. Okay, is there any evidence that any of those things are true? Yes, a deal was lost, but doesn't every company lose deals? Doesn't every CEO like not get every single whatever he wants to get, he or she wants to get? Didn't you do 10 of these deals last year? And this is just like the one that didn't come through. Isn't that a net like great year? And so I call that part the reality check, where you just like you look at this negative factor and this trigger event, but you look at it in the context of everything else. And I'm like, oh, wait a second. Okay. Yeah, that sucks. Would have been great to get that deal. Fucking Kevin got the client again.
Sorry.
I know, man. But yeah, I got these other 10 ones done. Oh shit. Like, that's pretty good. And then I do the reality check. And then the last step is, how is this an opportunity? Okay. What did Kevin do in his presentation or his pitch or whatever that like helped him get it? And what can I learn from it? What can I adjust or tweak or better prepare myself with for that next opportunity? And so there's 1, 2, and 3. And first, let it flow through you and understand that like your reaction to events is going to be extreme, and that's okay, right? That's who you are, and that is okay. Step 2, do the reality check. Put the whole event in the context of your successes. So, right, that you don't just see this one negative thing. And then step 3, cool, the negative thing happened. What do you learn from it? And like, how are you better the next day because that happened? How can I be actually fortunate? And this is fucking next level, which I'm not at yet, but how can I be fortunate that happened because of how much better I'm going to be next time? So that's like what I've learned.
But that's an amazing ability to step outside yourself and be able to look at it like that, though.
Oh, but it's super hard, and it's not like someone explained those steps to me, and I was like, oh, cool. It's been like reps at the gym, like slow and steady repetitions and practice and getting the mind in better shape, just like you would, on the treadmill.
So the story that you just said brings to mind the story that I had with my guest last week, who is a professional musician who's in the Rock Hall of Fame. And we were talking about critics. And he said, a lot of musicians or artists will jump off the stage and try and go after that one person who says you suck. And you've got 89,999 other people in there that want to be there. Why do we always focus on that one negative? Why?
Mm-hmm. I think like we're hardwired to. I'm 100% sure of that. Like I'm very hardwired to.
I take it personal. Any criticism I take personally.
I started, so I've recently not at that level, but similarly, I've started to try to publicize my book, and I've started to build a platform over the past year of, putting myself out there as somebody that's maybe a thought leader on this stuff that can help others by, telling my story and what I've learned from it. And and it's like, I knew this was going to happen before I did it. And it's still hard to manage now. You put something out there on LinkedIn or Instagram or whatever, and it's like, a lot of people are like, this is awesome. Like, thank you for posting this. Like, I can really connect with this. And then the 30th one is someone being like, you don't know what you're talking about. Like, you don't really know about depression. Like, you're full of shit. And I knew that was going to happen. And even when it happened that first couple of times, I was really reacted to it, but I had prepared myself for it because I knew that was coming, and I've done this work of like getting myself ready for situations like that. So it was a little bit easier to manage. So the way to practice like the emotional response to those really hard triggering things, it's not practicing it when that stuff happens. It's practicing it like on way easier stuff, right? Like my therapist would do role plays with me. He'd be like, we're going to pretend a situation is happening. You're going to close your eyes and imagine it. And he would like pretend to be the client that rejected our business or some other scenario to trigger some of these events. So let me practice walking through it. And I go through those steps like I do it when I mean, seems small, but I do this all the time. Like I got like a workout schedule and I'm pretty like, I try to keep it. It's part of my whole physical and mental health package. And when I don't keep it, yesterday I fucking missed the workout and I will immediately spend 5 minutes thinking I'm in terrible shape. I'm physically a piece of shit. And there's so many more disciplined, tougher people out there. How come I can't work out every morning like those people? Why am I like lying in bed, belly aching? I shouldn't even bother with this. I let myself have that for 5 minutes, but then I remember, no, wait, practice the emotional response. Okay, what's the reality check? You worked out the other 6 days of the week, dude.
Yeah.
Cool. That's 6 wins and like one omission. I wouldn't even call it a loss. That's one little slip. Like it's all good. What's your plan? Okay, you don't like this feeling. Work out tomorrow morning and dig in and get after it. Cool. And like so when those come up, that's when you have to practice it. It's like in the small examples. So then when something bad happens, bigger, I'm like, I've got some repetitions where I've walked myself through that process and I can handle like a negative trigger not getting out of control. So that's like advice for whoever wants it.
How would you have reacted to this? Okay, because I didn't know how to react to it. I was speaking at a suicide prevention um, rally. Okay, and I was talking about my own trials and tribulations, and I had somebody come up to me at the end and say, "So, how do we know you're just not doing this for attention? Because most people who try to commit suicide and don't succeed, it's just a call for attention." I'm like, I was asked to be here, and I was asked to share my story. You know, you're always going to have cynical people like that. It's just crazy to me.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, there's no doubt, and like it's funny that it's uncanny that you said that because that's like one of the role plays that I did with my therapist. He's like, let's 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 fast forward a year. You have your book out. It did really good. You had a bunch of people that loved it. You got invited to do a reading. Imagine you do the reading and people are happy and they're applauding, and then someone raises their hand and say, and he was literally that. He's like, what if they say like, nah, this is all kind of bullshit. Like, you're just doing this for like, money or to get attention. So we actually like walked through that scenario, and I was like, that's a really good one to do because like you literally walk through it. And anytime you're putting yourself out there and you want to have if you want to have a big impact like you do and like I do, and you want to really help people, you are going to run into that every 10th person who questions what you're doing, who's probably frustrated with their own experiences and like would prefer to drag you down into a similar feeling, um, or maybe just thinks they know better and that you are off track. Like that is 100% going to happen to everybody who wants to make a big impact on the world, whether it's helping them or entertaining them. um, Whatever it is, there are going to be some serious detractors, and being ready for it, I think, is hugely important. Starting with like that very first person, and getting used to that feeling.
Well, it's like what we said earlier. We always harp on that one negative.
Yeah,
I'm sure you've had this same experience. You might have one negative comment, but you might have 99 other positive comments. Most of the time, because I had an audience, a weekly audience in Houston of 1.1 million listeners. And whenever I'd go out and talk about this, they'd be like, "You're the last person I thought would be struggling with something like this. Thank you for sharing this. Oh my gosh, I'm not alone."
right.
And that's why we do it.
Totally, totally.
That's why we do it.
And I got to a point. So I mean, this was not always my plan. Like I didn't intend to write a book, and I didn't intend to hold myself up and try to be a mirror to people to see what they might be going through and see some pathways out of it that they didn't think were possible. I really was like, I'm doing great. I'm so fortunate to be alive and have success, and I got my business, and I have my relationship. I got my routine. Awesome. And like something changed for me a few years ago where I just got to a point of like the thing that'll make me feel the best. Yeah, I want to keep doing all that stuff, and like I want to keep growing this company, like we're doing awesome, and we have an amazing set of people and values, and I want to see it flourish. But something that I need that will make me feel like really fulfilling the whole picture for me is helping people who are going through
Mhm.
or who will go through um, some of what happened to me. And because I want, like, if I could help one person go from where I was at 23, 22 to where I'm at 42 now, if I could just help one person do that and save them from, like, who knows what can happen, if they take the other fork in the road,
Right.
they move the other direction. That would be an amazing accomplishment and something that I would feel incredibly happy with, having had the chance to help that person. And if I helped two, three, 100, great, like even better. But it became clear to me that that was something essential to me in, like, my career path and getting outside of my just my business, but also um, using my success in business to hold up as an example, to say, hey, you might be a, an alcoholic, you might be struggling with addiction, you might have no idea how to get out of the mental health challenges you have, and you might never think that anything that you wanted to achieve might be possible. But let me tell you, like, let me literally prove to you as an example that, like, there is a pathway to it, and you can be, I don't know, the entrepreneur or the musician or the actor or the chef or whatever that goal was. Like, it is available. Super hard, no doubt. Like, hard work, but it is available. And, like, to help someone, even just to be a small piece of helping them in their journey of getting from that rock bottom spot to where they actually see their dreams materialize, um, it is an incredible feeling, and it's something that I decided I really wanted. And that's when, like, at first I was just writing, like, because it's a therapeutic exercise. And I started really, like, writing about my life, particularly starting at the same spot that I told you as a kid, and walking through that journey just for myself. I started putting it on paper to relive it a bit, to understand it, to see this is what was happening then. And eventually people started to kind of figure out what I was doing. And just my friends, because I would kind of disappear for a few weeks and just go write. And they're, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm just writing, man. Just, like, literally writing full time, 9 to 5 every day. Like, why? I'm like, I don't know. It, like, makes me feel better. I'm just putting short stories together. And eventually someone's like, dude, people need to read that. Like,
Yeah.
other people need to see that. And I'm like, you think so? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, I don't know. And sooner or later, like, these short stories, I just started to weave them into a book. And um, enough people around me gave me the signal that, like, yo, dude, you could really help people out here with the way you're communicating it, and the experiences you've had. Like, a lot of people out there need to know that they're not alone, just like you thought you were. And I was just like, you know what? The idea of that message resonating with people and actually helping them change their life in a positive way really inspired me. And so I'm on podcast with you now, and that's why I'm putting a book out later this year. That's why I'm doing all the stuff I'm doing, that I'm doing.
The book is called Coming Up for Air, if I'm not mistaken, right?
It is.
Coming Up for Air. Final question for you, David Shamszad. You win a $2 billion lottery, or you're still alive today. Which one shocks you more?
That's an awesome question. I say this with no bullshit at all. Every day, at least once, I have an overwhelming feeling of gratitude that I am alive.
Mm-hmm.
I feel that every single day. I've never held it up next to 2 billion in lottery and done the side by side Pepsi Coke comparison. But I do choose the latter, and I can tell you that every single day, especially when things might look like bumpy around me, I just look back to what my life could have been, and I do that, and I think of that poof and how quickly, like, everything could disappear. Um, and I have an overwhelming, immense sense of gratitude for my life, that brings tears to my eyes. So I'll fuck yeah, 2 billion. Whoa. Okay. A lot. I'd rather go like try to figure out a way to earn it and just focus on the gratitude I have for being here.
Absolutely, brother. I'm in the same boat with you, man. I think that's why we got along so well. And I think that's why this was such a great conversation, is because you and I think we're so similar, just so similar. We have such similar paths and we have such similar desires. So congratulations on the baby. Congrats on the marriage. Congrats on the business. And much success to you, man. I can't wait for the book to come out later this year, you said, right?
Yeah.
My thanks to David Shamszad for joining me, for giving us his time, for telling us his story, and for sharing such intimate details. His book, coming up for air, will be released later on in 2024. Thank you again for listening. I appreciate you beyond words when you share your time with the Fuzzy Mike. And feel free, share the Fuzzy Mike with your friends and family. It's not illegal. Stay connected with the Fuzzy Mike. You can follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, or you can email me at thefuzzymike@gmail.com. For video, please subscribe to the Fuzzy Mike YouTube channel. The Fuzzy Mike is hosted and produced by Kevin Klein. Production elements by Zach Sheesh at The Radio Farm. Social media director is Trish Klein. I'll be back next Tuesday with a dynamic new episode of The Fuzzy Mike. I'm going to be speaking with a member of the Rock Gods Hall of Fame. He was a bassist for Ozzy Osbourne, and he's worked with many, many other great rock and roll icons. Tune in. You don't want to miss that one next Tuesday. So grateful for you. Oh, and by the way, I'm also on a new podcast, the Tuttle and Klein podcast, episodes every Wednesday. Look it up, Tuttle and Klein. Thank you so much.
That's it for the Fuzzy Mike. Thank you. The Fuzzy Mike with Kevin Klein.
Fuzzy Mike.